The emergency lights flashed red across every screen in the council chamber. Delegates from 300 different worlds sat in their special seats, watching the hologram in the center of the room. The image showed something terrible. A massive swarm of alien creatures was moving through space, eating everything in its path. 17 star systems had already been destroyed. Billions of lives were gone. Ambassador Velshara stood up from her seat. She was from a planet called Centaurus Prime, and her body had 6 thin arms that moved gracefully when she spoke. Her voice shook as she addressed the council. The translators in the room made sure everyone could understand her words in their own language. The Corinthian swarm is unstoppable. We have tried everything. Our best weapons do nothing against them. They just keep coming, eating everything, growing stronger. We need to evacuate the outer systems immediately. Other delegates nodded in agreement. Fear filled the chamber. The civilized galaxy had never faced anything like this before. For 10,000 years, they had lived in peace. They had avoided wars and conflicts. They believed that intelligence and diplomacy could solve any problem. But the swarm did not talk. It did not negotiate. It only consumed. That was when the alarms went off again. A ship had appeared outside the station. But this was different from the usual arrivals. The ship had simply materialized in space, appearing from nowhere. This should have been impossible with current technology. The security systems went crazy. The ship was covered in weapons. Not just a few weapons for defense, but hundreds of them. Missiles, cannons, energy projectors, and devices that the sensors could not even identify. It looked like a flying fortress designed for one purpose only: war. A message came through the communication system. The voice was calm and confident. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of Earth. We received your distress signal. We are here to help with your pest problem." The council chamber erupted in confusion. Earth? Nobody had heard of this planet before. The database showed no records of any civilization from that world. But the captain was already requesting permission to dock and address the council. After a quick debate, the council agreed to meet these humans. 3 figures walked through the airlock into the station. The first was Captain Morrison, a tall man with short dark hair and eyes that seemed to notice everything. His face showed lines and scars that told stories of a hard life. Behind him came Lieutenant Sarah Kim, a woman with sharp features and the posture of a trained soldier. The third was Dr. Ben Rodriguez, who wore glasses and carried a data tablet. The moment the humans entered the council chamber, every biological scanner in the room started beeping warnings. The readouts were disturbing. These creatures registered as predators. Their eyes faced forward, perfect for hunting prey. Their muscles were dense and powerful, far stronger than necessary for a normal civilization. Their bones were thick and heavy, suggesting they came from a high-gravity world. But the most alarming thing was their stress response. When civilized species faced danger, their bodies prepared them to run away. Human bodies did the opposite. Their hearts beat faster, their muscles tensed, and their minds became sharper. Everything about their biology screamed one message: fight. Many delegates moved back in their seats. Some were afraid. Others were disgusted. How could such violent creatures have developed space travel? Where did they come from? Captain Morrison walked to the center of the chamber. He moved with easy confidence, not worried about the hundreds of aliens staring at him. He held up a small data chip and spoke clearly. "My name is Jake Morrison. I represent the planet Earth and the human species. We understand you are dealing with a dangerous alien swarm. We would like to offer our services to help eliminate this threat." A delegate from the Archon Dominion stood up angrily. "Services, eliminate? You speak of the Corinthian swarm as if it were nothing. This force has destroyed 17 star systems. Our combined fleets could not stop them. What makes you think you can do better?" Morrison smiled. Several delegates flinched at the sight of his teeth. It was a predator's expression, and it made them deeply uncomfortable. "Because we come from a world that has been trying to kill us for 4 billion years. We learned how to fight back." Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward and activated a holographic display. The image showed a blue and green planet rotating slowly. It looked beautiful at first glance. But then the display zoomed in to show details that made the council members gasp. "This is Earth. The oceans contain creatures that can grow larger than your ships. Some have teeth as long as a person's body. Others have venom that can kill in seconds. The land has predators that hunt in packs using strategy and cooperation. There are insects that carry diseases capable of killing millions. The weather produces storms that can flatten entire cities. Earthquakes reshape the landscape without warning. Volcanic eruptions bury whole regions under ash and lava. The display continued showing images. Massive hurricanes, tornadoes that touched down from the sky like fingers of destruction, tsunamis that swallowed coastlines, forest fires that burned for months, ice ages that covered continents. Dr. Rodriguez continued speaking. 99% of all species that ever lived on Earth are now extinct. Life on our planet is a constant struggle for survival. Every creature is either predator or prey. Every day is a fight to find food, avoid danger, and live long enough to reproduce. Lieutenant Kim added more information, and humans became the dominant species on this world. We did not do this by being the strongest or the fastest. We did it by being the smartest, the most adaptable, and the most determined. We learned to use tools. We learned to work together. We learned to plan and strategize. Most importantly, we learned how to fight and win against impossible odds. The hologram changed to show human history, ancient battles with thousands of warriors, medieval sieges lasting years, modern wars involving millions of soldiers and weapons of incredible destruction. The images showed cities reduced to rubble, landscapes scarred by combat, and casualty numbers that made even the Corinthian swarm's destruction seem small by comparison. Velshara felt something she had never experienced before, a strange mixture of horror and hope. These humans were terrifying. Their world was a nightmare. Their history was written in blood. But maybe, just maybe, creatures forged in such conditions could face the swarm and survive. She stood up and addressed the humans directly. Captain Morrison, your world sounds like what we call a death planet, a place where no civilized species should be able to evolve. Yet you stand here before us having somehow achieved space travel. If we give you access to our tactical data about the swarm, what will you do? Morrison's expression became serious. We will study the swarm. We will identify its weaknesses. Then we will design a strategy to destroy it. Completely. We will not contain it or push it back. We will eliminate the threat so it can never hurt anyone again. The council chamber filled with arguing voices. Half the delegates wanted to send these dangerous humans away immediately. The other half saw them as the only hope for survival. The debate raged for hours. Finally, Velshara called for a vote. The motion passed by a narrow margin. The humans would be given access to all information about the Corinthian swarm. They would be authorized to engage the enemy using whatever methods they deemed necessary. Morrison nodded once. Thank you for your trust. We will not let you down. He turned to his crew. Let's get to work. We have a war to plan. As the humans left the chamber, Velshara watched them go. She had made a decision that would either save the galaxy or doom it to an even worse fate. Only time would tell which outcome would come to pass. But one thing was certain. The galaxy would never be the same again. The Deathworlders had arrived. 3 days after the meeting, the human fleet arrived at the Helios system. This was where the Corinthian swarm was currently feeding, consuming everything in its path. The system had once been home to 5 billion people across 3 planets. Now it was becoming a graveyard. Velshara watched from her command ship, positioned safely at the edge of the system. Around her ship were vessels from 24 other species. They had all come to witness what would happen when the humans faced the swarm. Most expected to see the humans die quickly. Some hoped the humans would at least buy enough time for more evacuations. The human fleet consisted of 50 ships. Compared to the 1,000-ship armadas that had already failed against the swarm, this seemed pathetically small. But as Velshara studied the human vessels through her sensors, she noticed something unusual. The ships moved differently than any military force she had ever seen. Normal fleet tactics involved ships staying in formation, maintaining clear lines of communication, and presenting a unified front. The human ships did none of these things. They spread out across a huge area of space, constantly changing their positions and velocities. The patterns looked random, but Velshara's tactical computer detected an underlying structure. Every ship could support every other ship with weapons fire. Every position covered multiple attack angles. It was chaos that somehow made perfect sense. The swarm detected the humans quickly. Millions of bioships, each the size of a small building, turned toward the new targets. The swarm had evolved to overwhelm enemies with sheer numbers. Individual bioships were not very smart or strong. but together they formed a living weapon that could drown any defense in bodies. The swarm launched its attack. A wave of bioships rushed toward the human fleet like a tsunami of living matter. Velshara had seen this tactic destroy entire battle groups in minutes. The sheer mass of the swarm made conventional weapons almost useless. You could destroy 1,000 bioships and barely make a dent in their numbers. Then the humans opened fire, and Velshara understood why everyone had been so afraid of them. The weapons the humans used were unlike anything in the galactic arsenal. Kinetic rounds accelerated to incredible speeds punched through dozens of bioships at once. The impacts created explosions that vaporized everything nearby. Missiles with advanced guidance systems hunted down the larger swarm vessels, their warheads designed to cause maximum internal damage. But the most terrible weapons were the thermal beams. These were focused energy weapons that heated their targets from the inside. Bioships hit by these beams began to boil. Their internal fluids turned to steam, building pressure until the creatures exploded in showers of organic matter. The swarm kept coming, but the humans had prepared for this. They did not try to fight the entire swarm at once. Instead, they focused their fire on creating debris fields. Dead bioships became obstacles that disrupted the swarm's formation. The swarm's own numbers worked against it as bioships crashed into the wreckage of their fallen companions. A military advisor from the Xanthorian hierarchy spoke up from the observation deck. Those tactics are brutal. They are using the swarm's strength against itself. And those weapons, they are designed to cause maximum suffering. How can they justify such cruelty? Velshara did not answer immediately. She was beginning to understand something important about humans. The galactic civilizations had rules about warfare. They tried to minimize suffering even when fighting. They saw war as a last resort and conducted it with restraint. Humans had no such limitations. When humans fought, they fought to win. Period. The battle continued. The humans identified the swarm's breeding vessels, the large bioships that created new swarm members. While most galactic forces had tried to fight all the swarm equally, the humans focused on these key targets. Destroying the breeding vessels would prevent the swarm from replacing its losses. The breeding vessels were protected by thousands of smaller bioships. The humans did not care. They used missiles to clear paths through the defenders, then hit the breeding vessels with their most powerful weapons. Each breeding vessel destroyed meant thousands of potential bioships would never be born. Then the humans deployed something that shocked everyone watching. They released canisters into the swarm. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then bioships began attacking each other. The humans had used biological weapons, viruses designed to affect the swarm's nervous system. Infected bioships lost control and turned on their neighbors. The observation deck erupted in arguments. Biological weapons were banned by every civilized treaty. Using disease as a weapon was considered one of the worst possible war crimes. Yet the humans had deployed such weapons without hesitation. Velshara watched the battle and realized something profound. The galactic civilizations fought wars expecting to make peace later. They had rules because they might need to negotiate with their enemies someday. But the Corinthian swarm could not negotiate. It could not be reasoned with. It existed only to consume. Against such an enemy, mercy was pointless. The humans understood this instinctively. 6 hours after the battle began, it was over. The Corinthian swarm, which had consumed 17 star systems, had been reduced to scattered remnants fleeing in all directions. The human fleet had lost only 3 ships. 200 human soldiers were dead or injured. By any reasonable measure, this was an impossible victory. Captain Morrison's face appeared on all the observation screens. He looked tired but satisfied. His report was brief and professional. Hostile force neutralized. Breeding vessels destroyed. Remaining swarm units are fleeing the system. We recommend establishing monitoring stations to track any survivors. The threat to this region is eliminated. Then Morrison added something unexpected. We noticed that your defensive strategies focus on large ships and fixed formations. That works well against enemies who fight like you do. But against swarm tactics, you need different approaches. We would be happy to share our tactical knowledge and help you redesign your defense doctrines. The offer was made without arrogance. Morrison spoke like a professional sharing advice with colleagues. But his words highlighted an uncomfortable truth. Humans understood warfare far better than any galactic civilization. They had been fighting wars for their entire existence and had developed tactics and strategies that the galaxy had never imagined. Delegate from the Keltorian hierarchy, asked a question that had been bothering everyone. "Captain Morrison, your species clearly excels at combat. Tell us honestly, do you enjoy warfare? Do you take pleasure in destruction?" Morrison's expression changed. The satisfaction disappeared, replaced by something harder and sadder. "No, war is terrible. Anyone who tells you differently is either lying or insane. Being good at something does not mean you enjoy it. We are good at war because we had no choice. Our world forced us to become fighters or die. That does not mean we like what we have become." He paused, looking directly at the camera. "You asked us to solve a problem. We solved it. If you want us to teach you how to defend yourselves properly, we will do that too. But you need to understand something important. The galaxy is dangerous. Being nice to things that want to kill you is a fast way to extinction. Sometimes survival requires you to fight with everything you have. Sometimes you need to be willing to do terrible things to protect what matters." The transmission ended. The observation deck fell silent. Everyone was processing what they had witnessed. The humans had saved them from the swarm, but they had done it with methods that seemed barbaric. Yet those methods had worked when nothing else did. Velshara made a decision. She would recommend that the Council accept the human offer to help redesign galactic defenses. The galaxy needed to learn from these Deathworlders, not because humans were better or superior, but because they understood something that civilized species had forgotten. In a dangerous universe, the ability to fight was not something to be ashamed of. It was a necessity for survival. The question now was whether the galaxy could learn to balance civilization with the capacity for violence. The humans had somehow managed it. Perhaps with their help, the rest of the galaxy could too. 3 months passed since the humans had destroyed the Corinthian swarm. The Galactic Council was still arguing about what to do with Earth and its people. Some delegates wanted to give humans full membership and welcome them as equals. Others wanted to keep humans at a distance, worried about their violent nature. The humans seemed unconcerned about the political debates. They had established an embassy on Council Station, the massive space structure where galactic government took place. Ambassador Helen Grant ran the human diplomatic mission with calm efficiency. She was older than the military officers, with gray hair and patient eyes. She had been a teacher before becoming a diplomat, and understood that building trust took time. Not everyone wanted to be friends with humans. A group of species led by the Archon Dominion actively worked against human integration. Their leader, High Chancellor Theron, gave speeches warning that humans were dangerous barbarians who would eventually turn their weapons against the galaxy itself. Velshara found herself defending humans in council debates. She had spent months studying human culture and history. What she learned challenged everything her species believed about civilization. Humans were complex creatures full of contradictions. They could be violent and gentle, destructive and creative, selfish and self-sacrificing. The key to understanding humans, she realized, was their adaptability. They were not naturally violent. They were practical. Their dangerous world had forced them to develop the capacity for extreme violence, but it had also given them strong social bonds and moral codes. Remove the threat and humans chose peace, but threaten what they cared about and they became unstoppable. Theron disagreed completely. During a private meeting, he told Velshara that any species capable of such violence would eventually use it, regardless of circumstances. He believed humans were a threat that would destroy the galaxy given enough time. Then came the second crisis that would prove who was right. A distress signal arrived from the outer reaches. Pirates had attacked a medical transport ship carrying refugees. The ship had been escorting people away from a planet destroyed by natural disasters. Now 200 civilians, including children from a dozen different species, were being held hostage. The pirates demanded a huge ransom. The Tellurian Confederation, which controlled that region of space, responded according to standard procedures. They established a blockade around the area. They opened negotiations with the pirates. They prepared for a long standoff while trying to wear down the criminals and rescue the hostages safely. The Council approved this approach. It was the civilized way to handle hostage situations. Minimize risks. Avoid violence when possible. Be patient and wait for opportunities. Captain Morrison contacted the Council with an offer. His ship was already patrolling that region. He could reach the crisis in 6 hours and attempt a rescue operation. Theron immediately opposed this idea. Sending human soldiers into a delicate hostage situation would be disastrous. The humans would turn it into a bloodbath. Better to follow proven methods and negotiate carefully. Ambassador Grant made a proposal. Let Captain Morrison assess the situation first. If he determined that a military solution would endanger the hostages, the humans would withdraw and support the diplomatic approach. But if he saw a way to rescue everyone safely, he should be allowed to try. The council agreed, mostly because they were curious. Everyone had seen humans fight against the swarm. Now they would see how humans handled a situation that required precision instead of overwhelming force. Morrison arrived at the crisis location and did nothing for 2 hours. His ship stayed far away while he studied every piece of information available. He analyzed the pirate vessel's design, the hostage locations, the surrounding space, and every possible variable. When he finally transmitted his rescue plan to the council, even his supporters were shocked. The rescue operation lasted exactly 14 minutes. Human special forces used small pods to approach the pirate ship from an unexpected angle. They entered through an emergency airlock that the pirates had forgotten about. The human soldiers moved through the ship with perfect coordination, using stun weapons that knocked out pirates without creating dangerous crossfire. The pirates never understood what was happening. One moment they were guarding hostages and arguing with negotiators. The next moment they were unconscious on the floor with human soldiers securing the area. All 200 hostages were rescued without a single injury. The pirates were restrained and prepared for transfer to proper authorities. Morrison reported mission complete with the same calm tone he used for everything. The council chamber erupted in confusion and celebration. Half the delegates were cheering the rescue. The other half were demanding to know how such a thing was possible. Theron sat silently, realizing his arguments against humans had just been undermined by a perfect demonstration of controlled force. When order was restored, Ambassador Grant addressed the assembly. She explained concepts that were foreign to most galactic civilizations. Humans had rules about warfare. They called them rules of engagement. These rules governed when force could be used, how much force was appropriate, and how to protect innocent people during combat. Grant explained that humans had developed these rules precisely because they understood how terrible uncontrolled violence could be. They knew they were capable of massive destruction. That knowledge made them careful about when and how they used their abilities. Yes, humans could destroy, but they could also choose not to destroy, even when they had the power to do so. That choice, that self-control, was what separated them from mindless threats. Theron stood up to argue, but found he had nothing to say. The hostage rescue had proven exactly what he claimed humans could not do. They had used precise, carefully controlled force to protect innocent lives. They had shown discipline and restraint. His political coalition began to fall apart as delegates changed their minds about humanity. The vote for full human membership came a week later. It passed with a narrow majority. Not everyone was comfortable with humans, but enough delegates recognized that Earth could be a valuable ally, rather than a threat. After the vote, Velshara met privately with Ambassador Grant. The human diplomat smiled warmly and thanked her for the support. Velshara asked a question that had been bothering her. Did you plan for the pirate crisis to happen? Did you arrange for an opportunity to prove humanity could be trusted? Grant laughed softly. No, we did not create the crisis. But when it happened, we recognized it as an opportunity. We knew that many species feared us because of our capacity for violence. We needed to demonstrate that we could control that capacity. Captain Morrison and his team did exactly that. Velshara nodded slowly. You manipulated the situation to your advantage. Used the crisis to achieve your political goals. That is very human of you, Grant smiled. We prefer to call it practical diplomacy. But yes, humans are good at recognizing opportunities and using them. It is one of the traits that helped us survive on Earth. Adaptation is not just about physical strength. It is also about social intelligence and strategic thinking. Velshara realized that humans were more complex than she had thought. They were not just warriors. They were strategists, diplomats, and planners. They thought several steps ahead and positioned themselves to take advantage of situations. This made them valuable allies, but potentially dangerous enemies. The galaxy had accepted humanity into the Council. But the real work was just beginning. Humans would need to prove themselves again and again. They would need to show that their violent capabilities served peaceful purposes. and they would need to teach the galaxy lessons that civilized species had forgotten. Velshara looked out at the stars and wondered what the future would bring. The Deathworlders had proven they could save lives as well as take them. Now they needed to show they could build and create, not just fight and destroy. Time would tell if humanity was truly ready to be part of galactic civilization. 6 months after humanity joined the Galactic Council, something happened that made the swarm crisis look like a minor problem. The eldest returned. Nobody had expected this. Most species thought the eldest were just legends, ancient stories told to children. The eldest were the first civilization to reach the stars. They had evolved billions of years ago and achieved technology beyond anything the current galaxy could imagine. According to ancient records, they had supposedly transcended physical reality, becoming beings of pure energy that existed on higher planes of existence. Their return meant something had gone terribly wrong. The eldest appeared in the core systems without warning. Their ships were enormous structures that seemed to bend reality around them. They existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that most species could not even perceive. Looking at their vessels made people's eyes hurt and minds confused. Their message was broadcast to every inhabited world simultaneously. The younger races had failed in their duty to maintain order in the galaxy. The eldest would now take direct control again. They would restructure all existing civilizations to better serve what they called the cosmic order. The restructuring process was horrifying. The eldest did not kill people. Instead, they absorbed them into a collective consciousness. Individual minds were erased and combined into a single shared awareness controlled by the eldest. Physical bodies remained alive and functional, but everything that made each person unique was destroyed. It was the death of identity and culture. It was genocide of the soul while keeping the body alive. The council was paralyzed by fear. How could anyone fight beings who existed in higher dimensions? The eldest could manipulate space and time itself. They could create matter from pure energy. They were not conquerors in any normal sense. They were gods returning to manage disobedient children. 3 major star systems fell in the first week. Billions of beings were absorbed into the collective. The eldest moved methodically and efficiently, showing no emotion or mercy. They believed they were doing the right thing, bringing order to chaos. The council evacuated to a hidden station in neutral space. Panic spread through every species. Some were already preparing surrender messages. Others were organizing evacuation fleets to flee beyond the galactic rim, hoping to escape to unexplored regions where the eldest might not follow. Nobody talked about fighting back. Fighting the eldest seemed as pointless as fighting gravity or time itself. That was when Captain Morrison walked into the council chamber. He was accompanied by an older woman with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes that held decades of military experience. Morrison introduced her as Admiral Lisa Chen, commander of Earth's Strategic Defense Initiative. The Admiral's first words silenced the entire chamber. "We are not surrendering. We are going to fight." Theron, who had finally accepted human membership but still harbored doubts, laughed bitterly. "Fight? Against beings who exist beyond normal reality? What can humans possibly do against the eldest? They are essentially gods." Admiral Chen activated a holographic display showing Earth's history. She began with ancient mythology, showing how human stories were filled with tales of mortals challenging gods and sometimes winning. Then she showed more recent history, displaying times when humanity had faced seemingly impossible threats and survived through creativity and refusal to give up. The eldest think they are gods. Maybe they are, but humans have been fighting our gods since we first learned to use tools. We do not accept divine authority. We do not bow to cosmic hierarchies. Every tyrant who ever claimed superiority over humanity has eventually fallen. The eldest will be no different. Velshara leaned forward in her seat. "What is your plan?" The Admiral's plan sounded insane. Humanity did not have weapons that could directly affect higher dimensional beings. So instead of fighting the eldest where they existed, humans would force them into normal reality where conventional physics applied. They would do this by targeting the technology that allowed the eldest to exist partially outside normal spacetime. Earth had been developing experimental weapons designed to manipulate dimensional boundaries. These weapons were originally meant for faster-than-light travel research, but they could be weaponized to collapse the higher dimensional space the eldest occupied. It was pure human thinking. If you cannot fight the enemy where they are strong, change the battlefield to somewhere they are weak. The theory had never been tested at the scale required. Success was far from certain, but it was a plan which was more than anyone else had. The council gave unanimous approval. They had nothing left to lose. The preparations took 3 weeks. Human engineers worked day and night to modify their weapon systems. Scientists from dozens of species contributed data and theories. Everyone understood that this was the last chance. If the humans failed, the galaxy would fall to the eldest forever. The battle was planned for the Kaldor system, where the eldest had established a major processing center for absorbed populations. The human fleet consisted of 30 ships, each equipped with the experimental dimensional weapons. Other galactic forces provided support and backup, though nobody really believed conventional weapons would matter. When the human fleet arrived, the eldest responded with what seemed like contempt. They barely acknowledged these primitive vessels as threats. Their massive ships moved slowly and confidently, secure in their superiority. Then the humans activated their dimensional weapons. Reality screamed. The space around the eldest fleet rippled and twisted. The carefully maintained higher dimensional structures they relied on began to collapse. The eldest, existing partially in normal space and partially beyond it, found themselves being pulled entirely into conventional reality. For the first time in millions of years, the eldest were fully physical. They were subject to normal physics. They were vulnerable. The humans attacked immediately. Their ships had been designed to fight against impossible odds. Now they faced opponents who had forgotten what vulnerability felt like. The eldest ships, built for existence across multiple dimensions, were clumsy and slow when forced into 3-dimensional space. Human weapons tore through eldest vessels. Kinetic rounds punched holes in structures that were not designed to resist physical damage. Missiles found weak points in ships that had never needed armor. Energy weapons overloaded systems built for manipulating reality, not defending against direct attack. The eldest tried to respond, but they were fighting a war they did not understand. They had not engaged in real combat for thousands of years. They had relied on their technological superiority and dimensional advantages. Stripped of those advantages, they discovered that humans were far better warriors. The battle lasted 3 days. It was brutal and exhausting. Human ships took heavy damage. Casualties mounted, but the humans never stopped fighting. They pressed the attack relentlessly, giving the eldest no time to adapt or escape. When the battle finally ended, the eldest fleet was destroyed. Some ships were shattered wrecks floating in space. Others had managed to flee back to their higher dimensional refuge, abandoning the invasion. The survivors broadcast a message of retreat, withdrawing from all occupied systems. The galaxy had been saved by beings the eldest had dismissed as primitive animals. The myth of eldest invincibility was broken forever. In the aftermath, Velshara visited the human flagship to personally thank Admiral Chen. The admiral was exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes from 3 days of constant combat. But she smiled when Velshara arrived. The ambassador asked a question that had been troubling her. How did you know it would work? The dimensional weapons were theoretical. You bet everything on an untested idea, Admiral Chen shrugged. We did not know for certain. But we knew that doing nothing meant certain defeat. Taking a chance on an uncertain victory was better than accepting guaranteed failure. That is another lesson from Earth. Sometimes survival requires taking risks that seem insane. Velshara understood. The Deathworlders had saved the galaxy again, this time by refusing to accept that any enemy was truly unbeatable. It was a mindset born from billions of years of survival on the most dangerous planet imaginable, and it was exactly what the galaxy had needed. After the defeat of the eldest, everything changed for the Galactic Council. The peaceful civilizations that had believed technology and diplomacy could solve any problem now understood the universe was far more dangerous than they had thought. The council chambers, once filled with philosophical debates about art and culture, now hosted discussions about military strategy and defensive preparedness. Humans became teachers. Admiral Chen established a military academy on a neutral space station. Officers from hundreds of different species came to learn human tactical thinking. The classes were difficult by galactic standards. Students were forced to solve problems where everything went wrong, and victory seemed impossible. The instructors, explained that these were exactly the situations where proper training made the difference between survival and extinction. Hoping for the best was not a strategy. Preparing for the worst was the only way to ensure you would be ready when disaster struck. Velshara attended one of Captain Morrison's lectures. She watched him explain combined tactics to a room full of alien officers who struggled with concepts that seemed obvious to humans. Morrison was patient, taking time to explain principles that were intuitive to people from Earth, but revolutionary to species that had evolved in safer environments. After the lecture ended, Velshara visited Morrison in his office. The room was decorated with items from Earth. There were photographs of places she recognized from her studies. A physical book about military history sat on his desk. Most surprisingly, there was a small plant in a pot that Morrison apparently cared for personally. She asked a question that had been bothering her for months. "Why are you helping us? After the way we treated you at first, after all the suspicion and resistance, why do you continue to invest so much effort in our defense?" Morrison watered his plant while considering the question. His answer was practical and straightforward. "Because you asked for help. Because we can make a difference. And because isolating ourselves would make everyone less safe, including Earth." He paused, then added something more personal. "I have seen what happens when good people refuse to prepare for bad situations. They get hurt. Their families suffer. Their entire civilizations can fall. We have the knowledge and ability to help prevent that. Not using these capabilities just because some people are uncomfortable would be wrong." Velshara understood something important in that moment. Humans were not trying to dominate the galaxy or prove they were superior. They genuinely wanted to help, in the same way they had helped each other survive on their dangerous homeworld. The violence they could commit was not their defining feature. It was just one tool among many, built for survival and protection. 6 months after the eldest crisis, the Council made an official decision. Humanity would become the galaxy's permanent security force. This position came with serious responsibilities. Humans would respond to major threats, train defensive forces across all species, and maintain constant readiness for future crises. In exchange, Earth gained full voting rights in the Council and access to all galactic technology and resources. It was a fair trade that benefited everyone. Not everyone was happy about this arrangement. Some species remained nervous about human capabilities, but the majority recognized an important truth. The galaxy was safer with humanity as an ally than it had ever been without them. 3 years after first contact, Velshara decided to visit Earth. She wanted to see the death world that had produced such remarkable beings. Her Centaurian body required a protective suit to survive the harsh gravity, dangerous microbes, and oxygen-rich atmosphere. But she endured the discomfort because she needed to understand where humans came from. Captain Morrison served as her guide. He showed her natural wonders and human cities. She saw oceans deep enough to crush her ship, mountains that seemed to touch the sky, weather systems powerful enough to destroy her entire civilization's homeworld. She witnessed earthquakes, storms, and the raw power of a planet that fought against life itself. But she also saw humanity's response to these challenges: beautiful art celebrating nature's power, architecture designed to withstand disasters, communities that came together after catastrophes to rebuild and support each other. Humans did not just survive their world, they had learned to thrive despite it. The most revealing moment came at a memorial for fallen soldiers. Thousands of names were carved into black stone walls. Each name represented a human who had died in conflicts throughout their history. Families placed flowers at the memorial and stood in quiet remembrance. Velshara realized something profound. Humans remembered their dead. They honored the cost of violence even while maintaining the capability for it. Every weapon they built, every tactic they developed, every war they fought was balanced against the knowledge of what war truly meant: pain, loss, grief that echoed through generations. That evening, she and Morrison watched the sunset over an ocean. The sky turned brilliant colors as the sun touched the horizon. Velshara asked another question that had been on her mind. How do you maintain the balance between being capable of violence and being horrified by it? How do you stay human while being such effective warriors? Morrison was quiet for a long time before answering. We remember why we fight, not for glory or conquest or dominance. We fight to protect, to defend, to give people the chance to live peaceful lives. The moment we start enjoying violence or forgetting its cost, we lose something essential about being human. He gestured toward the memorial they had visited earlier. Every name on those walls represents someone who understood that principle. They did terrible things in terrible circumstances because the alternative was worse. We honor them not for the killing, but for being willing to carry that burden so others would not have to. Velshara returned to the council and filed a detailed report. It was different from her previous assessments. She wrote less about human military capabilities and more about human philosophy. She described a species that had mastered violence, but never stopped questioning whether that violence was necessary. Warriors who prepared for war while hoping they would never need to fight. A civilization that had survived the worst their universe could offer, and emerged stronger, kinder, and more determined to prevent others from suffering similar trials. The report changed how many species viewed humanity. They began to see humans not just as dangerous Deathworlders, but as people who understood that strength without compassion was just brutality, and compassion without strength was just weakness. Humanity had both qualities, forged together over billions of years. 5 years after first contact, Ambassador Grant hosted a celebration at the human embassy. Representatives from every council species attended, even those who had initially opposed human membership. They came to commemorate the anniversary of the Corinthian swarm's defeat and the beginning of humanity's role in galactic civilization. Grant gave a speech that would be remembered for generations. She spoke about partnership and mutual growth, about how humans had learned from galactic civilization just as the galaxy had learned from humanity, about building a future where all species could flourish, protected by those capable of violence but dedicated to peace. The celebration ended with a traditional human ceremony, a moment of silence for all those who had died protecting others, regardless of which species they belonged to. Hundreds of beings from dozens of worlds stood together in quiet reflection. They were united by understanding that peace required vigilance, and vigilance required capability. Later that evening, Velshara and Morrison stood in the embassy observatory, watching the celebration below and the stars beyond. She commented on how much had changed since that chaotic first council session, when humanity had announced themselves as specialists in extermination. Morrison chuckled. Yeah, we probably could have introduced ourselves with better diplomacy, but honestly, it might not have made a difference. You needed to see what we were capable of before you could trust that we would only use those capabilities when necessary. Velshara agreed. You are right. We had to see the Deathworlders in action before we could understand them as people. Now we see both sides. The warriors who saved us and the friends who teach us. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the future unfold. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, filled with threats both known and unknown. But for the first time in history, civilized species faced those threats with real confidence, born from genuine military capability rather than hopeful diplomacy alone. The Deathworlders had taught the galaxy how to fight. More importantly, they had taught why fighting mattered, not for conquest or glory, but for the simple right of all beings to exist in peace. 10 years after humanity joined the Galactic Council, the galaxy had transformed in ways nobody could have predicted. The peaceful civilizations that once avoided even discussing military matters now maintained professional defense forces trained by human instructors. Species that had never fought wars now understood basic tactics and strategic thinking. But the most important change was not military. It was philosophical. The galaxy had learned that peace was not the absence of conflict. True peace was the presence of justice, protected by those willing and able to defend it. This was a lesson humans had learned the hard way over thousands of years of history. Captain Jake Morrison had retired from active military service. He now ran the military academy full-time, teaching the next generation of officers from across the galaxy. His students came from hundreds of different species, each bringing their own perspectives and challenges. One afternoon, Morrison stood in front of a mixed class of 50 students. They were practicing tactical scenarios in the academy's simulation rooms. Today's exercise involved defending a civilian station against raiders, while minimizing casualties on both sides. Most of the students failed the scenario on their first attempt. They either used too much force and killed civilians, or used too little force and let the raiders succeed. Morrison watched their attempts patiently, taking notes on each team's approach. After the last team finished, he gathered everyone in the briefing room. His voice was calm but serious as he addressed them. Every single team failed this exercise, not because you lack skills or intelligence. You failed because you are still thinking like your ancestors. You believe that every problem has a perfect solution. You expect that if you are smart enough and careful enough, nobody will get hurt. He pulled up footage from several of the attempts, showing critical moments where teams had hesitated or second-guessed themselves. Here is the truth that humans learned on Earth. Sometimes there are no perfect solutions. Sometimes every choice leads to someone getting hurt. In those situations, your job is not to find the perfect answer. Your job is to choose the option that causes the least harm and accept the consequences of that choice. A young Centaurian officer raised her hand. But Captain, how do we live with making choices that hurt people? How do we accept that responsibility? Morrison's expression softened. That is the hardest part of command. You live with it by remembering that someone has to make these choices. If good people refuse to take that burden, then bad people will make the decisions instead. You honor the weight of your choices by making them carefully and never forgetting their cost. The class fell silent. Morrison could see understanding dawning in their eyes. This was the lesson that separated soldiers from warriors. Soldiers followed orders. Warriors understood why those orders existed and what they truly meant. Meanwhile, Ambassador Helen Grant was dealing with a different challenge. A new species had just achieved faster-than-light travel and discovered the galactic community. The Vorlons came from a peaceful world with abundant resources and few natural predators. They were excited about joining the Council but deeply troubled by its military focus. Their representative, Speaker Kelvin, expressed concerns during a private meeting with Grant. We developed advanced technology through cooperation and mutual support. We have never known war. This emphasis on military capability seems wrong to us. Cannot the galaxy return to purely peaceful ways? Grant smiled gently. She had been asked this question many times over the years. I understand your concern. Your world sounds wonderful and I am genuinely happy for you. But consider this. You were able to develop peacefully because your world allowed it. Earth did not give us that luxury. She activated a display showing Earth's history beside the Vorlan homeworld's history. The contrast was stark. Where the Vorlans had steady technological progress, Earth showed cycles of advancement and destruction. Where Vorlans had peaceful cooperation, Earth showed endless conflicts. We did not choose to become warriors. We became warriors because we had no other option. But here is what you need to understand. The galaxy is not a safe place. The Corinthian swarm did not care about your peaceful intentions. The eldest would not have been stopped by diplomatic conversations. Threats exist whether you acknowledge them or not, Grant continued. The current galactic order allows peaceful species like yours to thrive because those capable of violence are willing to protect the peace. We are not asking you to become warriors. We are asking you to support those who carry that burden for everyone's benefit. Speaker Kelvin considered this carefully. So humanity sacrifices its peaceful nature to protect ours? Grant shook her head. No, we sacrifice nothing. Our capacity for violence is part of who we are, but it does not define us. Humans can be gentle, creative, and compassionate. We simply also understand that sometimes compassion means being willing to fight against those who threaten the innocent. It is not a sacrifice. It is a choice. Across the galaxy, human influence continued to spread. But it was not military conquest or cultural dominance. Instead, humans were becoming bridges between different ways of thinking. They helped peaceful species understand the necessity of defense. They helped warrior cultures understand the value of restraint. They taught everyone that strength and kindness were not opposites but partners. Velshara, now a senior council member, often reflected on how much had changed. She remembered those early days when humans had seemed like dangerous monsters. Now she understood they were simply people shaped by extreme circumstances who had chosen to use their capabilities for good. During a council session marking the 10th anniversary of human membership, she gave a speech that captured what many were feeling. When the humans first arrived, we were afraid. We saw their capacity for violence and assumed they were monsters. We were wrong. The humans taught us that the capacity for violence is not the same as the desire for it. They showed us that the strongest warriors can also be the gentlest protectors. They proved that coming from a dangerous world does not make you dangerous. It makes you careful, prepared, and deeply committed to preventing others from suffering as you have suffered. She paused, looking around the chamber at representatives from hundreds of species. 10 years ago, we were dying. The swarm was consuming us. The eldest were erasing our identities. We had no answers. Then the Deathworlders came and showed us that having answers is not about being the smartest or most advanced. It is about being willing to face hard truths and make difficult choices. The chamber erupted in approval. Even species that had initially opposed humanity now recognized their value. The humans had not conquered the galaxy. They had saved it and then taught it how to save itself. That evening, Jake Morrison stood on an observation deck watching ships come and go from the academy. Students from dozens of species were heading home, carrying knowledge that would protect their worlds. He felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see Admiral Chen, who had come for the anniversary celebration. She smiled at him. "Do you ever regret it? Taking on this responsibility? Teaching the galaxy how to fight?" Morrison thought about the question seriously. "No, I regret that it was necessary. I regret that the galaxy had to learn these lessons the hard way. But I do not regret helping. Every student who graduates from this academy is someone who can protect their people. Every species that learns to defend itself is one less victim, waiting for the next crisis." "That matters," Chen nodded. "Earth made us into warriors, but we chose to be more than that. We chose to be teachers, protectors, and partners. That is the real victory, not the battles we won, but the peace we helped build afterward." They stood together, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, new threats would eventually emerge. The universe was too vast and too dangerous for eternal peace. But when those threats came, the galaxy would be ready. Not because humans would fight for them, but because humans had taught them to fight for themselves. The Deathworlders had saved the galaxy, not once or twice, but continuously, by ensuring that future generations would never be as helpless as the galaxy had been when the swarm first arrived. It was the greatest gift one civilization could give to another. Not protection, but the ability to protect themselves. And in return, the galaxy had given humanity something equally precious. A place where their strength served purpose, rather than just survival. A community where their hard-earned wisdom was valued. A future where being warriors did not mean they could not also be builders, dreamers, and friends. It was exactly the kind of partnership worth fighting for. And fight for it they would, for as long as the galaxy needed them.